Jake Morrison stared at his new neighbor through the transparent wall between their apartments. He quickly looked away when she turned her head toward him. His heart was pounding fast in his chest. The woman who just moved in next door was not human. She was a Draconi, one of the most dangerous species in the entire galaxy. The station manager had warned him yesterday. A new resident was coming to live in the empty apartment next to his. Jake lived on a space station called New Terra that floated above a colony planet. Many different species lived here together, but Draconi were rare. They usually stayed on their own worlds. They did not like mixing with other species, especially humans. Jake watched as the tall figure moved around her new apartment. She stood at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. Her entire body was covered in green scales that looked like polished emeralds. They caught the light from the station's artificial sun panels and sparkled. She had a long tail that moved behind her like a snake. On her head, she wore a crown of sharp horns that curved backward. Her hands ended in claws that could probably tear through metal. The Draconi were known as warriors throughout the galaxy. They had conquered many worlds before humans even learned how to travel between stars. Their empire was vast and powerful. They were strong, fast, and trained to fight from childhood. Most species feared them. Humans had fought wars against them in the past. Many people on both sides had died in those conflicts. Jake knew all this as he unpacked his groceries in his small kitchen. He tried not to think about his new neighbor. She activated the privacy shield between their apartments and the transparent wall turned dark. He felt relieved and worried at the same time. Living next to a Draconi warrior could be dangerous, but this was a civilian station. Everyone here had to follow the peace treaties. Still, old fears were hard to forget. The next morning, Jake woke up early for his job at the research lab. He worked as a scientist studying alien biology. It was interesting work, and he loved learning about different species. He grabbed his bag and opened his door to head to the elevator. At the same moment, his neighbor opened her door too. They both stopped and looked at each other. Up close, she was even more impressive. Her amber eyes were bright and sharp. They seemed to look right through him. She wore a standard jumpsuit like everyone else on the station, but it had been changed to fit her body. There were special openings for her tail and adjustments for her unusual shape. Jake felt his mouth go dry. He should say something. It would be rude to just stare. His mother had taught him to always be polite to neighbors no matter who they were. "Good morning," he said. His voice came out quieter than he wanted. The Draconi woman looked at him for a long moment. Jake wondered if she would ignore him. Many Draconi considered humans beneath them. They called humans weak and primitive. But then she nodded her head slightly. "Good morning," she replied. Her voice was deep and had a musical quality to it, like she was singing instead of talking. They stood there for another awkward second. Then Jake nodded back and hurried toward the elevator. His hands were shaking a little. That had not been so bad. Maybe having a Draconi neighbor would not be terrible after all. Over the next few weeks, Jake and his neighbor developed a routine. They would see each other in the hallways or at the elevator. They would exchange polite greetings. Nothing more. Jake learned her name was Vera from the building directory. She worked in security for the station administration. That made sense. Draconi were natural fighters and protectors. Jake noticed that Vera always seemed tense. She walked with perfect posture, her shoulders back and her head high. She never relaxed. Even when she was just going to her apartment, she moved like she expected an attack at any moment. Her tail stayed rigid behind her. Her hands stayed near her sides, ready to fight. One evening, Jake came home late from the lab. He had been working on a difficult project and lost track of time. As he walked down the corridor to his apartment, he heard a sound that made him freeze. Someone was crying. The sound was coming from Vera's apartment. Jake stood in the hallway, unsure what to do. The crying was not loud, but it was painful to hear. It sounded like someone who had been holding in their emotions for a very long time and could not hold them anymore. Jake had never thought about Draconi crying. They always seemed so strong and cold. He knew he should probably just go to his own apartment. Vera would not want anyone to know she was upset. In Draconi culture, showing weakness was considered shameful. They believed warriors should always be strong. Crying was for children, not adults. If anyone found out, it could hurt her reputation. But Jake could not just walk away. The sound was too sad. He had been lonely on this station too. He understood what it felt like to be far from home, surrounded by strangers. Before he could change his mind, he pressed the button next to her door. The crying stopped immediately. There was silence for a long time. Jake almost left. Then the door opened. Vera stood there looking at him. Her eyes were still wet, but her face had returned to its usual calm expression. She was trying to hide what she had been feeling. "Yes?" she asked. Her voice was controlled and steady. Jake felt nervous, but he pushed forward. "I heard you crying. Are you okay? Do you need help?" Vera's eyes went wide. She looked genuinely surprised. "You are concerned about me?" "Well, yes. We are neighbors. And you sounded really upset." She stared at him for what felt like a very long time. Jake could see her thinking, trying to decide something. Then she stepped back from the door. "Perhaps you should come inside." Jake walked into her apartment. He had no idea what he was doing. He barely knew this woman. She could be dangerous, but something told him she needed someone to talk to. And maybe, just maybe, he needed that too. Vera's apartment was simple and clean. She did not have much furniture. Everything looked very organized. But there were a few personal items around the room. A hologram of a purple ocean sunset rotated on one wall. Small crystal sculptures sat on a shelf. In the corner, strange plants that glowed with soft light grew in a small garden. They must have been from her home world. "I am sorry you heard that," Vera said. She gestured to a chair. "It was not appropriate for me to show such emotion." Jake sat down carefully. The chair was reinforced to hold her weight, but it worked fine for him too. Everyone has bad days. You do not need to apologize for having feelings. Vera's mouth twitched slightly. It might have been the start of a smile, though it was hard to tell. "The irony of a human telling me about feelings is interesting." She sat across from him, her tail curling around her feet. "You should know that what you heard, if my people knew about it, they would consider it a great shame to my family." "I will not tell anyone," Jake promised. "What happens between neighbors stays between neighbors." Vera looked at him with those intense amber eyes. "Why do you care, Jake Morrison? Your species and mine have been enemies for a long time. The Draconi have killed many humans. We have taken planets that your people found first. We have treated you with nothing but contempt. Why would you care if I am sad?" Jake thought about it for a moment. "You are not your whole species. You are just Vera, my neighbor who is having a bad day. That is enough reason for me to care." Something changed in Vera's expression. She looked softer somehow. She was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper. "I have been exiled from my people." Jake felt his breath catch. He knew enough about Draconi culture to understand what that meant. Exile was worse than death for them. To be cut off from your family and your clan was the worst punishment possible. It meant you no longer existed in the eyes of your people. "I refused to follow an order," Vera continued. Her claws dug into the armrests of her chair without her seeming to notice. "My commander ordered my unit to destroy a colony ship. It was full of civilians, families with children. Not soldiers, not warriors. Just normal people trying to find a new home in space." She looked away from him. Her voice became harder. "I said no. I told my commander it was wrong to attack defenseless people. I said we were warriors, not murderers. The rest of my unit followed the order and destroyed the ship. I was stripped of my rank and banished. Now no Draconi will speak to me. I am dead to my people. I have no family. No home, nothing." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he was not angry at Vera. He was angry at the injustice of what had happened to her. "You did the right thing. That took real courage." "Courage?" Vera laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I am a coward who could not follow orders. That is how my people see me. That is not what I see," Jake said firmly. "I see someone who stood up for what was right, even when it cost her everything. That is not being a coward. That is being a hero." Vera looked at him with such confusion on her face that Jake almost wanted to laugh. It was clear no one had ever said anything like that to her before. She did not know how to respond. "Your species is very strange, Jake Morrison," she finally said, but maybe not in a completely bad way. They talked for hours that night. Vera told him about her home planet and what it was like growing up in Draconi society. She explained the strict rules and the constant pressure to be strong. She talked about the family she would never see again. Jake shared his own stories about Earth and his struggles to fit in on the station. He talked about being... After that night, everything changed between Jake and Vera. They started spending more time together. At first, it was just small things. They would have coffee together in the morning before work. They would meet for dinner a few times each week in the station's cafeteria. Slowly, they became comfortable around each other. Jake discovered that Vera had a sense of humor. It was dry and subtle, but it was there. She would make comments that caught him completely off guard and made him laugh. She seemed surprised that he found her funny. Maybe no one had ever laughed at her jokes before. Or maybe Draconite humor was just different, and humans were not supposed to understand it. Vera also showed interest in Jake's work at the research lab. She would ask him questions about the experiments he was running. She wanted to know about the different species he studied and how their bodies worked. Jake loved talking about his work, and Vera was a good listener. She remembered details from conversations they had weeks ago. She made connections between different ideas that Jake had not thought of. One evening, they were eating dinner in Vera's apartment. She had cooked a meal from her homeworld. The food was spicy and had flavors Jake had never tasted before. Some of it was a little too intense for his human taste buds, but he tried everything. Vera seemed pleased that he was willing to try her cooking. "I have been thinking about something," Jake said between bites. "About a project I started a few months ago. I have not told anyone about it yet." Vera looked at him with interest. "What kind of project?" Jake pulled out his datapad and activated the holographic display. Complex diagrams and genetic sequences appeared in the air above the table. Numbers and charts rotated slowly. "It is about medicine, about how we treat diseases and injuries." Vera leaned forward to study the data. Her amber eyes tracked the information moving across the display. "I am listening. Right now, medicine is different for every species," Jake explained. He felt himself getting excited as he talked. This was something he had been thinking about for a long time. A treatment that works for humans might not work for Valorians. A medicine that helps the krill might poison the Draconi. Every species needs its own doctors and its own drugs. We cannot help each other. "This is the way it has always been," Vera said. "Our bodies are too different." "But what if they are not as different as we think?" Jake leaned forward. "What if there are basic biological processes that all intelligent species share? What if we could find those common elements and create treatments that work for everyone?" Vera's eyes widened. She looked back at the holographic display with new interest. That would change everything. If you could create universal medicine, it would save countless lives across the galaxy. But it would require genetic information from hundreds of species. It would take years of research. And you would need computing power that most facilities do not have. "I know," Jake said. "And there is another problem. The big governments are not interested in this kind of research. They see it as helping their enemies. Why would humans want to develop medicine that could help the Draconi? Why would the Draconi want to create treatments that benefit humans? Everyone is too focused on old hatreds and past wars." Vera was quiet for a long moment. She sat back in her chair, her tail moving slowly behind her. "Why are you telling me this?" Jake took a deep breath. "This was the hard part. Because I need help. I have done as much as I can on my own. I have access to many genetic databases through my work at the lab. I have been running simulations in my free time. But I have reached a point where I cannot continue alone. I need more computing power. I need someone who understands biology and medicine. I need someone I can trust." "You want my help," Vera said. It was not a question. "Yes, I know it is a lot to ask. And I know the risks. If people find out what we are doing, there could be serious consequences. But I think you understand why this matters. You gave up everything because you refused to hurt innocent people. This project is about saving them. All of them. Human, Draconi, everyone." Vera stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the stars beyond the station. Jake waited, his heart pounding. He knew he was asking for something huge. Vera had already lost so much. If she helped him with this project and they were discovered, the consequences could be terrible for both of them. "You realize what you are proposing," Vera finally said. Her voice was soft. "If we succeed, we will be giving our enemies the same medical advantages our own people have. There are Draconi commanders who would use better medicine to keep their warriors fighting longer. They would use it to make their armies stronger." Jake had thought about this. Maybe. But there are also Draconi children dying from diseases that this research could cure. There are human children too. And Valorian children. And krill children. I have to believe that saving lives is more important than military advantage. I have to believe that healing matters more than fighting. Vera turned to face him. Her expression was serious. You are either the bravest human I have ever met or the most foolish. Can I be both? That made her laugh. It was a real laugh, warm and genuine. Jake had never heard her laugh like that before. Yes, I suppose you can be both. She walked back to the table and looked at the holographic display again. I will help you, Jake Morrison, but you must understand what you are asking. If my people discover that I am helping a human with research that could benefit their enemies, they will consider it the ultimate betrayal. The consequences would be severe, for both of us. I understand the risks, Jake said. And you must also understand why I am agreeing to this, Vera continued. I am not doing it for recognition or gratitude or any noble reason. I'm doing it because I am tired of death. I have seen too much of it. I have caused too much of it. If there is a chance to save lives instead of ending them, I will take that chance. Jake reached out his hand. That is good enough for me. Vera looked at his hand for a moment. Then she reached out and took it. Her hand was larger than his and her scales felt smooth and warm. They shook hands, human and Draconi, starting a partnership that would have been impossible just a year earlier. Over the next few weeks, they set up a secret laboratory in Vera's apartment. They moved some of the furniture to make room for equipment. Jake brought devices from the lab that he could borrow without raising suspicion. Vera used her security clearance to access computing systems during off hours when no one was monitoring them closely. They worked late into the night, every night. Jake would finish his shift at the research lab and come straight to Vera's apartment. They would work until the early morning hours. Then Jake would stumble back to his own apartment for a few hours of sleep before starting all over again. The work was difficult and frustrating. For every step forward, they seemed to take 2 steps back. The genetic data was complex and hard to interpret. The simulations kept failing. The computing systems would crash at critical moments. There were nights when Jake wanted to give up, when the whole project seemed impossible. But Vera never gave up. She had a warrior's determination. When something did not work, she would approach it from a different angle. When they hit a wall, she would find a way around it. Her discipline and focus kept them moving forward even when progress seemed impossible. Jake also learned more about Vera during those long nights. She told him stories about her childhood on her home world. She described the harsh training that all Draconi children went through. She explained the complex honor codes that governed every aspect of their society. Jake began to understand why she had been exiled. In Draconi culture, following orders was more important than being right. Loyalty to your clan was more important than your own conscience. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked one night. They were taking a break, drinking tea that Vera had made. Do you ever wish you had just followed the order? Then you would still have your family and your home. Vera was quiet for a long time. Every day, she finally said. Every single day I think about what I lost. I think about my mother and my siblings. I think about the home I will never see again. The pain of exile never goes away. She looked at him. But no, I do not regret my choice. I could not live with myself if I had helped kill innocent people. Some things are more important than belonging. Some things are more important than being accepted. Jake nodded. He understood. They were both outsiders now, both working on something that their own people would not understand or support. But they had each other, and they had a purpose. That had to be enough. 3 months into their partnership, they had a breakthrough. They had successfully mapped the genetic sequences of 20 different species. They found patterns that no one had noticed before. There were biological processes that appeared in every intelligent species they studied, just in different forms. Look at this, Jake said excitedly, pointing to the holographic display. This healing response. It exists in humans, Draconi, Valorians, Krill, all of them. The mechanism is slightly different for each species, but the underlying process is the same. Vera studied the data carefully. If we could trigger this response artificially, we could potentially treat injuries and diseases across species boundaries. This is remarkable, Jake. They were so focused on their discovery that they did not notice how late. Commander Krell had been watching Vera for 3 months. It was not personal. It was just his job. All exiled Draconi were monitored by military intelligence. They were considered security risks. Exiles might share secrets with enemy species. They might try to sabotage their own people out of revenge. The Draconi Empire did not take chances with such things. Krell had reviewed all the reports about Vera since her exile. She had moved to the new Terra station 6 months ago, She kept to herself mostly. She worked in security for the station administration. Nothing suspicious. Until recently. The monitoring systems had detected unusual energy signatures coming from her apartment. Large amounts of data were being processed. Computing resources were being used during off hours. Someone was running complex simulations. The patterns suggested scientific research, but Vera was not a scientist. She was a warrior. Krell decided it was time to investigate in person. He took a transport to the new Terra station. He did not announce his arrival. Surprise visits often revealed more truth than scheduled inspections. Meanwhile, Jake and Vera were completely unaware they were being watched. They had just achieved their biggest breakthrough yet. The universal healing treatment actually worked in their simulations. They had tested it on genetic samples from 17 different species. The results were consistent across all of them. "We need to move to the next phase," Jake said. He was pacing back and forth in Vera's apartment. He always paced when he was excited. "We need to synthesize a physical sample and test it on actual tissue, not just computer models." Vera was more cautious. "That will require resources we cannot easily hide. The synthesis equipment leaves records. People will ask questions." "I know," Jake said, "but we cannot stop now. We are so close." They spent the evening planning their next steps. They did not hear the quiet footsteps in the corridor outside. They did not notice the shadow that paused at Vera's door. Krell pressed the door chime. The sound made both Jake and Vera freeze. They looked at each other with alarm. No one ever visited Vera. She had no friends on the station except Jake. Vera stood and walked to the door. She checked the security display and her whole body went rigid. Jake saw her tail go stiff. Her hands curled into fists. Something was very wrong. "Who is it?" Jake whispered. "Drakenai military," Vera said quietly. "A commander. This is not good." She took a deep breath and opened the door. A massive Drakenai warrior stood in the doorway. He was even bigger than Vera, covered in dark blue scales. He wore full military armor with weapons at his sides. His eyes were cold and hard. "Commander Krell," Vera said. Her voice was carefully neutral. "What brings you to this station?" "You know exactly why I am here, exile," Krell said. He pushed past her into the apartment. His eyes swept the room, taking in everything. The equipment, the holographic displays, the genetic data floating in the air, consorting with humans, sharing technology, conducting unauthorized research. "Have you no shame?" "I am conducting medical research," Vera said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could see the tension in her body. "Nothing more." "Medical research that could benefit our enemies," Krell said. He walked around the room examining their work. "Medical research using stolen computing resources. Research you are conducting without authorization from any legitimate authority." His hand moved toward the weapon on his belt. "You will come with me. You will be questioned. You will reveal everything you and the human have discovered. Then you will both face justice for your crimes." Jake felt fear clutch his chest. This was really happening. They were going to be arrested. All their work would be confiscated. The research would be buried or weaponized. Everything they had worked for would be destroyed. But Vera was not afraid. Jake saw her shift her weight slightly. Her body moved into a combat stance. He had seen her practice fighting moves in her apartment sometimes. He recognized the position. "I will not let you destroy this work," Vera said. Her voice was low and dangerous. "Too many lives depend on it." "You prove my point, exile," Krell said. "You have become a traitor to your own kind." Everything happened very fast. Krell reached for his weapon. But Vera was faster. She grabbed his arm and twisted it, using his own momentum against him. Krell was a trained warrior. But Vera had been trained by the best fighters in the entire Drakenai military. She knew every move, every counter, every weakness. Within seconds, she had him disarmed and pinned against the wall. Krell struggled but could not break free. Vera's combat skills were superior. She held him easily despite his size and strength. Jake stood frozen, unable to believe what he was seeing. Vera had just attacked a military commander. There was no coming back from this. This was not just exile anymore. This was open rebellion. "We have been discovered," Vera said, glancing at Jake. Her voice was urgent. "We need to leave, now." "Leave?" Jake felt like his brain was moving through thick mud. "Leave where?" "This is a space station. We are in the middle of space." "I know a way," Vera said. She looked back at Krell. "I'm sorry, Commander. You gave me no choice." She struck a precise blow to a pressure point on the back of his neck. Krell's eyes rolled back and he slumped to the floor unconscious. Vera quickly used his own equipment straps to tie him up. "That will not hold him for long," she said. She was already moving to a wall panel. She pressed a hidden switch and a compartment opened that Jake had never seen before. Inside was a packed bag and what looked like access codes on a data chip. "I prepared for this possibility months ago. There is a maintenance shuttle in Docking Bay 7. If we move quickly, we can reach it before station security is alerted." Jake's mind was racing. This was insane. If they ran, they would be fugitives. They would be hunted across the entire galaxy. The Draconai would never stop looking for them. Human authorities would probably help in the search. They would have nowhere to hide. But if they stayed, Krell was right. They would be arrested. Their research would be taken. At best, it would be locked away in some government vault. At worst, it would be turned into a weapon. All those people they could save would die instead. "Jake," Vera said. She was standing by the door with the emergency pack. "I will not force you to come with me. This is not your fight. You can stay here. You can tell them I forced you to help me. You can go back to your normal life." She held out her hand. "But I must go. I cannot let them destroy what we have built." Jake looked at her hand. Then he looked at their research displayed on the holographic screens. He thought about all the lives that could be saved. He thought about the children dying from diseases that their work could cure. He thought about Vera, who had already sacrificed everything once to do the right thing. He grabbed his datapad with all their research backed up on it. Then he took her hand. "Let us go save the galaxy," he said. They ran through the corridors of the station. Vera led the way. She knew all the security camera blind spots. She knew which hallways the guards patrolled and when. They moved quickly but carefully, trying not to attract attention. Behind them, alarms started to blare. Krell must have woken up faster than Vera expected, or maybe someone had found him. Either way, the entire station was now on alert. "Faster," Vera urged. They started running openly now. There was no more point in stealth. They reached Docking Bay 7. Vera used her security codes to override the door locks. Inside, a small maintenance shuttle sat ready. It was not designed for long trips, but it would get them away from the station. They climbed aboard. Vera took the pilot seat. Her hands moved over the controls with confidence. Jake strapped himself into the co-pilot seat and held on tight. "I have never flown one of these before," Jake admitted. "That is fine," Vera said. "I have, many times." The shuttle's engines roared to life. Vera piloted them out of the docking bay and into open space. Behind them, Jake could see security ships beginning to launch from the station. They were coming after them. "We will not outrun them in this craft," Vera said. Her eyes were focused on the navigation display. "But I know where we can go. Somewhere they cannot follow us." "Where?" "The free colonies. The neutral zone." Jake had heard of the free colonies. They were settlements in unclaimed space beyond the borders of any major empire. They were havens for refugees, criminals, outcasts, and anyone who did not want to live under government control. They were also dangerous places where survival depended on your own strength and wits. "The Draconai military will not pursue us openly into the neutral zone," Vera explained as she programmed their course. "It would violate the peace treaties. And the free colonies do not extradite fugitives. We will be safe there. More importantly, they have scientists and medical facilities. We can continue our work." The security ships were getting closer. Vera pushed the shuttle's engines to maximum. She performed evasive maneuvers that made Jake's stomach flip. Weapons fire streaked past them. The shields absorbed several hits, but they would not hold forever. Then Vera found what she was looking for. A hyperspace lane that was barely marked on official charts. It was risky. The route was not properly mapped, but it would take them where they needed to go. "Hold on," Vera said. She activated the hyperspace drive. The stars stretched into lines. Then everything went white as they jumped. Jake let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. They had escaped, for now. But he knew this was just the beginning. The journey through hyperspace took 4 days. 4 long days of flying through barely mapped routes, constantly checking behind them for pursuit. Jake and Vera took turns sleeping in the cramped shuttle. They survived on emergency ration packs that tasted like cardboard. Every time the proximity alarms beeped, Jake's heart would race thinking they had been found. But each time it was just asteroid debris or random space junk. Jake had a lot of time to think during those 4 days. He thought about his family back on Earth, His mother would be worried when she could not reach him. His sister would see the news reports about a fugitive scientist. What would they think? Would they understand why he had done this? Or would they think he had lost his mind? He also thought about his career. He had spent years studying xenobiology. He had worked hard to get his position at the research lab. All of that was gone now. He could never go back to that life. His name would be marked in every human database as a criminal. But when he looked at the data on his datapad, at all the research he and Vera had completed, he knew he had made the right choice. This work was bigger than one person's career. It was bigger than one person's life. It could save millions of people across dozens of worlds. Vera was quieter than usual during the journey. She spent most of her time monitoring their course and checking the shuttle's systems. Jake could see the weight of what they had done pressing down on her. She had attacked a military commander. She had fled from justice. There was no going back for her either. On the fourth day, they finally approached their destination. The free colonies were not a single place. They were hundreds of settlements scattered across a region of space that no empire wanted to claim, too far from major trade routes, too poor in resources, too difficult to control, so it had become a haven for anyone who did not fit in anywhere else. Vera guided their shuttle toward the largest settlement in the region. It was called Haven Point, and it was built inside a massive asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into a city. As they approached, Jake could see the lights of the settlement glowing from the asteroid's many openings and docking ports. "Haven Point," Vera said. "I sent an encrypted message to someone here during our journey. If she received it, we should have a place to land." "She?" Jake asked. "A human woman named Kate Collins. She administers the medical district in Haven Point. I have never met her, but I have heard she is sympathetic to scientific research. I told her about our work. I hope she believes it is worth protecting." They received docking clearance and were directed to a landing bay deep inside the asteroid. As they set the shuttle down, Jake felt nervous. They were walking into unknown territory. These people owed them nothing. They might decide to turn them over to authorities for a reward, or they might just steal their research and kick them out. But they had no other choice. This was their only chance. A woman was waiting for them at the docking platform. She was middle-aged with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore practical clothes and had the confident posture of someone used to being in charge. "You must be Vera and Jake," she said as they climbed out of the shuttle. "I am Kate Collins. Welcome to Haven Point." "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Vera said formally. Kate looked them both over carefully. "I received your message about universal medical treatment research." "That is a bold claim. Can you back it up?" Jake pulled out his datapad and showed her their data. Kate studied it for several minutes, her expression growing more interested. She asked technical questions that showed she knew what she was looking at. She was not just an administrator. She was a trained scientist. "This is remarkable," she finally said. "If this data is accurate, you have made a genuine breakthrough. Do you realize what this could mean?" "We do," Jake said. "That is why we are here. We need a place where we can continue our work without interference from governments or military forces." Kate nodded slowly. "You should know that half the people in Haven Point are running from something. We do not ask about pasts here. We only care about what you can contribute to our community. If you are willing to share your research freely without patents or corporate control, then you are welcome here." "That was always our plan," Vera said. "Good. Then follow me. I will show you your new home." Kate led them through the winding corridors of Haven Point. The asteroid city was like nothing Jake had ever seen. Humans walked alongside krill merchants with their multiple arms carrying goods. Valorian engineers worked on power systems with their glowing photoreceptors. He even saw a few other Draconi, which surprised him. They nodded respectfully at Vera, showing none of the contempt that exiles usually received. "Many species live here together," Kate explained as they walked. "We have learned that survival requires cooperation. Old prejudices die quickly when everyone needs each other to live." She brought them to a large laboratory space in the medical district. It was well equipped with modern technology. Computers, synthesis equipment, genetic analyzers, everything they needed to continue their research. "This is yours," Kate said. "The equipment is a few years old, but it all works. You will have access to our genetic databases and computing networks. In return, we ask that any treatments you develop are made available to everyone in the free colonies. No restrictions, no costs. Just healing. Jake and Vera looked at each other. This was more than they had hoped for. This was perfect. We agree to your terms, Vera said. Kate smiled. Excellent. I will let you get settled. Tomorrow I will introduce you to some other researchers who might want to join your project. For now, rest. You both look exhausted. After Kate left, Jake and Vera stood in their new laboratory. It felt surreal. Just days ago, they had been fleeing for their lives. Now they had a place to continue their work, maybe even a chance to finish what they started. We did it, Jake said softly. We actually made it. Vera walked to the window. Outside, she could see the city spreading through the asteroid's interior. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds all living together. This is a strange place, she said. But perhaps it is where we belong now. Over the next few weeks, they settled into their new life. True to her word, Kate introduced them to other scientists in Haven Point. A krill geneticist named Vex joined their team. He was small and had 6 arms that could work on multiple tasks at once. A human doctor named Lisa Chang brought her expertise in cellular biology. A Valorian biochemist named Zor contributed his knowledge of energy transfer in living systems. Together, they formed a research team unlike anything that existed in the major empires. They had no hierarchy based on species. No one cared who was human or Draconai or krill. They only cared about the work. They only cared about saving lives. The research moved faster than ever before. With better equipment and more minds working on the problem, they made progress every day. They had access to willing volunteers from dozens of species who provided genetic samples. The diversity of Haven Point's population was perfect for their research. Jake found himself working harder than he ever had in his life. But it was different from before. Back on New Terra Station, he had worked alone, hiding his research, afraid of being discovered. Here he worked openly with a team that shared his vision. It felt right. Vera also seemed different. She smiled more often. She made jokes with the team. The rigid tension that had defined her for so long began to fade. She was still a warrior in many ways, still disciplined and focused, but she was also becoming something more. She was becoming a healer. One evening, several months after their arrival, Jake and Vera were working late in the lab. The rest of the team had gone home hours ago. They were running yet another simulation, testing their treatment on a new combination of species. Jake stared at his screen, afraid to believe what he was seeing. He ran the simulation again. The same results appeared. His hand started shaking. "Vera," he called out. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "Vera, come look at this." She hurried over from her workstation. "What is it?" Jake could not speak. He just pointed at the screen. Vera looked at the data. Her eyes went wide. She ran the simulation herself, checking the parameters, verifying the results. "It works," she whispered. "The treatment works. On all of them." The simulation showed their universal healing treatment successfully adapting to genetic samples from 17 different species. The results were consistent. The treatment recognized each species' unique biology and adjusted itself accordingly. It targeted disease and injury, while leaving healthy tissue untouched. It was everything they had hoped for and more. Jake felt tears running down his face. "We did it. We actually did it." Vera was crying too, something Jake had only seen her do once before on that first night when they became friends. But these were different tears. These were tears of joy. The next morning, they called the entire team together. They showed them the results. Lisa covered her mouth with her hands. Vex's antennae vibrated with excitement. Zor's photoreceptors flashed so bright they had to dim the lights. "We need to verify this," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "We need to test it on actual tissue samples, not just simulations." They spent the next week running physical tests. They synthesized samples of the treatment and tested it on tissue from every species they could access. Every single test came back positive. 6 months after their breakthrough, Haven Point had become the center of medical research in the known galaxy. Scientists from every major species were arriving daily, seeking to join the research teams or learn from the work being done. The small asteroid settlement was growing rapidly, expanding into new sections that had previously been unused. Jake found it strange to be famous. He had spent most of his life as a quiet researcher, unknown outside of small academic circles. Now his name was spoken across hundreds of worlds. People called him a hero. They called him a visionary. Some called him a traitor to humanity for sharing the research with enemy species. He tried not to pay attention to any of it. What mattered to him was the work. The universal healing treatment was just the beginning. His team had expanded to include over 30 researchers from a dozen different species. They were developing new treatments, exploring new possibilities. Every day brought fresh discoveries. One morning, Jake received a message that surprised him. It was from his sister on Earth. He had not spoken to his family since fleeing New Terra Station. He had assumed they wanted nothing to do with him after everything that happened. He opened the message with nervous hands. His sister's face appeared on the screen. She looked older than he remembered, more tired. But she was smiling. "Jake," she said, "I do not know if you will even get this message. I am not sure how to reach you in the free colonies, but I had to try. I wanted you to know that Mom and I understand why you did what you did. We saw the news reports. We saw what your research has accomplished. A little girl in our neighborhood was dying from a genetic disease. The doctors had given up. Then they tried your treatment. Jake, she is alive. She is healthy. Because of you." His sister's voice caught with emotion. "I know the government has labeled you a fugitive. I know they say you broke the law. But you saved that little girl's life. You saved thousands of lives. Millions of lives. Mom and I are proud of you. We will always be proud of you. I hope someday you can come home. But if you cannot, I want you to know that we love you. We support what you are doing. Stay safe, little brother." The message ended. Jake sat staring at the blank screen, tears streaming down his face. He had thought his family would hate him for what he had done. Learning that they understood that they supported him meant more than he could express. Vera found him like that, sitting alone in his office with tears on his face. She had learned to read human expressions better over the months they had worked together. "Bad news?" she asked quietly. "No," Jake said, wiping his eyes. "Good news. Really good news." He showed her the message from his sister. Vera watched it in silence. When it finished, she sat down across from him. "Your family sounds remarkable," she said. "They are," Jake agreed. "I am lucky to have them." Vera was quiet for a moment. "I received a communication as well. From my homeworld. From my clan leader." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "What did it say?" "He requests a meeting. He says that my actions, while still technically violations of military law, have brought unexpected honor to our clan. The universal healing treatment has saved many Draconi lives. Children who would have died are now healthy. Warriors wounded in combat are recovering faster than ever before. He suggests that given enough time and the right circumstances, my exile might be reconsidered." "That is amazing," Jake said. "You could go home." Vera looked at him with those amber eyes. "Perhaps someday, but not now. My work is here. My life is here, She hesitated. "My friend is here." Jake smiled. "I am glad you are staying. I do not think I could do this without you." "You would find a way," Vera said. "You are more resilient than you realize. But I am glad I do not have to find out." They sat together in comfortable silence. Outside the office window, Haven Point continued its busy life. Beings of every species walked past, working together, living together. It was what the galaxy could be if people chose cooperation over conflict. A few days later, Kate Collins called an emergency meeting. She gathered Jake, Vera, and the senior researchers in the main conference room. Her expression was serious. "We have a situation," she said. "I have been contacted by representatives from 3 major governments: the Human Alliance, the Draconi Empire, and the Valorian Collective. They are all requesting, separately, that we provide them with exclusive access to our research." "Exclusive access?" Lisa asked. "What does that mean?" "It means they want us to stop sharing our data freely," Kate explained. "They want us to give them advanced access to our discoveries before we publish them publicly. They are offering substantial funding, protection, legitimacy, everything we need to expand our operation." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "They want to control the research. They want to use it for military advantage." "That is certainly part of it," Kate agreed. "But they are also offering real benefits. With official backing from major governments, we could expand our research significantly. We could help even more people." "At what cost?" Vera asked. "The moment we accept funding from any empire, we lose our independence. We lose our ability to help everyone equally." "I agree," Kate said. "But I wanted to bring this to the team. This decision affects all of us. We should make it together." The debate lasted for hours. Some researchers argued that they needed the resources that government backing could provide. Others insisted that their strength came from their independence. The discussion grew heated at times, with voices raised and tempers flaring. Finally, Jake stood up. Everyone quieted to hear what he had to say. When I started this research, I was alone in a small apartment on a space station. I had nothing but an idea and determination. Vera joined me when she had every reason to walk away. We came here with nothing. Kate gave us a chance. This team came together because we believed in something bigger than ourselves. He looked around the room at all the faces watching him. Human, Draconai, Krill, Valorian, and others. If we accept government funding, we will compromise everything we have built. We will become tools of empire instead of healers. Yes, we might get more resources, but we will lose something more valuable. We will lose our purpose. We will lose what makes this work meaningful. He sat back down. The room was silent. Then Vex spoke up, his voice clicking with emotion. Jake is right. I came here because this was a place where species did not matter, where politics did not interfere with science. If we change that, we lose everything. One by one, others voiced their agreement. Even those who had argued for accepting the government offers admitted that Jake was right. They voted unanimously to refuse all exclusive deals. They would continue sharing their research freely with everyone. Kate smiled. I was hoping you would say that. Now comes the hard part. When we refuse these offers, those governments are not going to be happy. They might try to pressure us. They might try to shut us down. We need to be prepared for that. Over the next few months, the pressure came exactly as Kate predicted. The Human Alliance tried to cut off Haven Point's access to certain supply chains. The Draconai Empire sent warships to patrol near the free colonies, making subtle threats. The Valorian Collective spread rumors that the research was unsafe and untested, but the researchers continued their work. And something unexpected happened. The people across the galaxy, ordinary citizens who had benefited from the universal healing treatment, began to push back against their governments. They demanded that their leaders stop interfering with the research. They organized protests and petitions. They made their voices heard. Politicians who tried to restrict access to the treatments found themselves losing popular support. Military commanders who threatened Haven Point faced backlash from their own soldiers, many of whom had family members saved by the new medicine. The pressure from above was matched by pressure from below. Gradually, the threats decreased. The governments began to realize they could not control information that the people wanted to remain free. They could not stop progress that everyone benefited from. One evening, a year after their arrival at Haven Point, Jake and Vera stood on an observation deck watching ships arrive and depart. The station had grown enormously. What had been a small settlement was now a thriving city, and it was all because of the work they had started in a secret laboratory on New Terra Station. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked, echoing the question he had asked her once before. Do you ever wish we had just kept quiet and stayed in our normal lives? Vera thought about it. Sometimes I miss simple things. I miss my family, though that pain has lessened now that there is hope of reconciliation someday. I miss the certainty of my old life, even if that life was built on things I no longer believe in. She looked at him. But no, I do not regret our choices. We have saved more lives than I could have ever taken as a warrior. We have built something that will last long after we are gone. How could I regret that? Jake nodded. I feel the same way. I miss Earth sometimes. I miss my family. But I would make the same choice again. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars. You know what I realized? Jake said. When we first met, I was terrified of you. You were this scary alien warrior from a species that humans had fought wars against. I never imagined we would become friends, much less partners in something like this. Vera's mouth curved in what was definitely a smile now. I was terrified of